Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things, the only one. My name is George,
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
and with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com.
Oh,
Back
how
for
are we
another
going,
week.
boys?
Yeah, Peachy
Good.
Keen. I did notice that all of our stories this week are either about political violence or political instability, power changing hands.
Right.
Most of it's not good.
So
Yeah.
should we
not
just stop it
great.
now and just turn it off? We'll talk about movies or something
It'd
instead.
be a quick show. I really do envy the movie podcast guys where they're like, "Did you fucking see Ant-Man Quantumania? That was a piece of shit. Let's make ant jokes for 45 minutes." Like, what an easy life it must be.
Easy. You try making ant jokes for 45 minutes. I reckon I'd cap out at about 2 minutes.
Well, you
Anyway,
hit the nail on the head, Tom. And speaking of nails and hammers,
wow, that's a hell of a segue.
Paul Pelosi's attempted murder.
Yeah, so you might have noticed this week that a man was charged with breaking into the house of U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and Nancy Pelosi was not there. She was off at an event with her security, and I guess that security doesn't extend to family. I don't guess. I know that security doesn't extend to family members when they're not with the speaker, and so this guy barged into Nancy Pelosi's house and with a hammer and was screaming, "Where's Nancy? Where's Nancy?" and beat her husband about the head with a hammer. 82-year-old guy.
Jesus.
The guy, Paul Pelosi, managed to call the police during this encounter, and they sort of came to the home and stopped the assault. But the guy's got a fractured skull. He's in hospital. His situation's pretty critical. And the guy, the man charged, David Wayne DePape, has pleaded not guilty to the assault and attempted murder. Now, I don't know. Obviously, I'm not an American legal correspondent, even though I try and play one on TV. So I don't know how likely those charges of attempted murder are likely to be, how likely they are to succeed. But I mean, there's lots of other charges. What they do when they're really pissed at you is they put all of the different charges in the indictment.
Charges, yeah.
So it's not just attempted murder. It's also like elder abuse, assault with a deadly weapon, burglary, false imprisonment, and threatening a public official. Also 3 counts of being a shit bloke, 2 counts of excessive fuckery, and 1 count of listening to too much Fox News. So, they've really thrown the entire book at him. It seems like.
But he's not guilty, George.
Well, that is what he has claimed, even though he was arrested at the scene with a hammer. So. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like
Rick. I don't know.
If it looks like lots of hammer wounds to the head, it sounds like lots of hammer wounds to the head, and you're standing there with a hammer,
and
didn't do it.
And a fractured skull. It definitely seems. I don't want to preempt the process. It definitely seems like he did it.
It's funny because his lawyer, who represented him at the plea hearing,
public defender,
was like, "Yeah, I'm looking forward to providing him with a vigorous defense."
I too am looking forward to being in the news, Adam.
He'd only looked at the file a couple of hours before. I mean, that's probably the same for a lot of public defenders.
Sure.
But, we're going to be looking into Mr. DePape's mental state, and I'm not going to talk any further about that until I have more information, because quite frankly, I don't even know about his mental state because we haven't got that far.
Well, I can vouch some information about his mental state. The guy broke into someone's house with the intent of doing some sort of harm or kidnapping, allegedly. Allegedly wanting to do some harm to Nancy Pelosi, and ended up allegedly beating an old 82-year-old man about the head with a hammer. So I'd say his mental state's pretty not good, just based on that assessment.
Yeah. What a wild day for that public defender, because, most probably a public defender. Yeah, you're right. They get their reports that afternoon. Maybe they've only had a couple hours before they have to appear before a judge for whatever sort of proceeding. But mostly it's probably, oh God, all right, the X happened, Y happened. But then flipping open the report to be like, Speaker of the House's husband hammer attack. Oh God, cancel my 2 o'clock.
And we've got we've got Carol's been arrested for soliciting again. Carol, I thought I told you to get out of here, Carol. What are you doing? Anyway, next case, Paul Pelosi. Is that the same Pelosi that? Yeah, it is. Okay, I'm an international news story now. Cool.
Fun times.
The most concerning thing about all of this, of course, is that the American right wing, is just completely just taken a step back and said, look, the political rhetoric out of this country is out of control and violence against elected officials is never okay. Just kidding. Yeah, they're making fun of Paul Pelosi for getting hit in the head and the hammer because of course they are, because they're all fucking ghouls. Every last single one of them is a complete piece of shit. And
they've all been like conflating Paul Pelosi being attacked with a hammer with Brett Kavanaugh being yelled at in a restaurant, and all being like, you lefties, you should be all for this. This is all this is peaceful protest. Like, no, breaking into someone's house and then bludgeoning them with a hammer, I think is not peaceful protest.
When we say they, we're talking about the Twitter sphere, right?
No, we're talking about elected. No. We're talking about elected Republican officials and political commentators on major networks like Fox News making fun of a guy getting hit in the head with a fucking hammer. Okay? This is not just some egg on Twitter that's called himself Elon Musk, right? We're talking about actual fucking people who have platforms. Laura Ingraham, real people that real people listen to, saying, ha ha, sucked in cunt, for getting hit in the head with a fucking hammer. And it's not the same thing as Brett Kavanaugh getting accosted in a restaurant. Maybe if he got accosted in a restaurant with a fucking hammer to their head, they might have had a different ruling on the abortion debate. It's not the same thing. I'm sorry. It's not yelling at making someone feel uncomfortable over a creme brulee is not the same thing as a fucking home invasion. And the fact that anyone's laughing about it is fucking disgusting. If you're on the side of whatever the policies are, if you're on the side of politics, that's laughing at an 82-year-old man getting his skull fractured and sent to the emergency room after an alleged home invasion, if you're laughing at that, you're disgusting. You're a piece of shit. I don't know how this is not. They're not even seeing the other side as like human beings anymore. Like, this is the slippery road to fascism. This is how it happens. Thank you.
I mean, we can't say, of course, whether or not Mr. DePape's motives were related to the right.
He was saying, "Where's Nancy?"
We've got no proof of that at all.
He wasn't talking about Nancy Myers, romantic comedy writer. He was talking about Nancy Pelosi, whose house he invaded.
So yeah,
allegedly.
And meanwhile, this is all in the frame of the midterms coming up. Donald Trump's gearing up to go again. There's this whole sort of background to this, right? Where I think there are actually a lot of people are worried that when the midterms happen, there will be more political violence, marches, rioting, or potentially other random things that may happen.
Imagine seeing that.
And this is all the stuff that,
Imagine seeing this kind of political violence unfolding to the family members of elected representatives, and then saying, "Oh yeah, but I don't know. The Democrats are just as bad as the Republicans. I don't know. Inflation's pretty high. I know they are. I know, the Republicans did repeal a woman's right to choose. And I know they've got a bunch of shit-fucked policies.
And I know they've been drumming up their lunatic base to be skinning people in the streets for the past couple of years.
I know they're encouraging all of this, and they've got a whole misinformation ecosystem, but gas prices are pretty high. I just don't know which one I'm going to... I just don't know. It's like toss-up. They're both equally as bad as each other. There's one side that wants to pass... they passed the Inflation Reduction Act, a bunch of spending on climate change, plans for the future, reducing student debt. And then there's the other side who wants to set a nuke off in Times Square and laugh about it. But I just don't know which side is really... They're both pretty bad. So I think I might just stay
Hillary's
home
emails.
for this one. Did you hear about the Hillary's emails though? They're just as bad as each other.
Man, yeah, just insane. Like the set of scales where on one side you've got bludgeoning the spouse of the Speaker of the House with a hammer, and Hillary's emails totally level. Just
Anyway,
the weight is identical.
I hear they're giving guns human rights now, but whatever.
Nice. Guns have been guns have been longing to be citizens for so long now.
Did we find out whether or not Donald Trump's going to actually? He's been subpoenaed. Is anything happened?
He has
with
been
that
subpoenaed, but the fun thing about the midterms coming up and the Democrats likely to lose both the House and the Senate, according to the latest polling.
On ya, guys.
Yeah, nice one, guys. Way to
Nice
really
one.
just drop the fucking ball.
Hang on, I thought they were ahead in some.
They were ahead, and now they are not ahead. So maybe about 6 months ago, after the abortion decision came down, the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe versus Wade. Polls were looking really strong for Democrats. A lot of their messaging has been about the abortion debate. And it's that lead has slowly eroded back down to a losing position in like broadly across the board. Democrats had a 3 to 5 point lead, and now they're down sort of 1 to 3% across the board in terms of these midterms. So the Democrats have, the people say that it's been about the messaging. The Democrats have been focused largely on abortion, and Americans have just kind of like forgotten that horrible human rights tragedy. It's like, that was months ago. That was 4 or 5 months ago. Boring. I'm more concerned about gas prices and inflation in the economy. And I think the people that are going to steward the economy better, for some reason, because my brain is addled by syphilis, are the Republicans. I honestly, I wonder sometimes, like,
addled by syphilis.
Do the Americans, I know it's not the whole country, I know it's like a very vocal minority, but it just kind of makes me think, like, do they deserve our sympathy? Like, you seem like painfully, there is a contingent in the country that is like painfully, powerfully, weapons grade, proudly ignorant, and they just want to hurtle themselves into the abyss. And at a certain point, shouldn't we just let them? Shouldn't we just?
No, given if they are the vocal, as you say, they're a vocal minority, then therefore there's a majority who would also be falling into the abyss and suffering, and those are the people that I would have sympathy for.
Yeah, I know. I know. I agree with you.
Willfully ignorant. No, I see your point. Like the willfully, like just like proudly wanting to jump into that off that fiscal cliff.
It's beyond even. Like during the George W. Bush days, it's like, oh, people are tricked into voting against their self-interest because of these culture war issues, and it's the Republican Party that's to blame. It's not the American people. But when you have a situation like what we've got unfolding with COVID, with inflation, with the economy, with the war in Ukraine, to see all of that unfolding and then just like pull the lever for the Republicans, it's like, no, I actually don't think you're not just distracted. You're not being tricked into voting against your self-interest. It's like you have a kind of, it's almost like a political death wish or something like that. You want to blow things up. Like you want, it's a kind of nihilism. Like,
I don't know about that. I think people just see what they want to see, and it's the same with any political.
What's about the transgenders in the schools?
People just want to see what they want to see. No, they write the story in their head, and then they look at the pretty color on the screen and they go, "Yep, that's sort of lined up roughly with what I'm saying and thinking," and then away we go.
I don't even think that there's that much. You've got this Herschel Walker, right? The guy running for senator in Georgia, who's running on a pro-life platform, and like, of course, it turns out that he's had a number of affairs. He's sired children with these women. He's paid for abortions. And the response from the political commentariat is, I don't care. I just want a warm hand on the lever that will ban abortion. I don't care. It's like complete like nihilistic cynicism where it's like, I don't give a single fuck about the candidate, about their competency. All I want, everything that I want is for power to be in the hands of Republicans because I know they'll pull the lever to do the things that I want. And it's like, it's just like, it's beyond cynical. It's nihilistic. They are willing to burn the country down in order to get what they want, these Republicans. And I just can't, know if I can just continue caring about a country where 70
Are you
million
talking
Americans
about
want
like
to do that
Farmer
to themselves.
Farmer Joe, who's just I don't know who I should pick, or are you talking about like the Republican movement as such? Like, are you saying that the average American Republican voter is actually?
I think it's both. I think certainly the like Republican establishment and the Republican, the Fox News one, what's that other own news network? I think that whole apparatus is completely corrupt to its core. I don't think they even believe half the shit that they say. It's just Murdoch media being Murdoch media, right? Burning down the world for clicks. But I do think there is a painful lack of interest from American voters that works against their self-interest. I think there's a bunch of if you don't care at this step, what else needs to happen for you to become politically engaged and give a shit about your country burning down? Like, what else needs to happen? What could possibly happen for you to engage with your politics and vote for people who aren't actively trying to destroy your country and the world? Like, what would the thing have to be at this point?
I think if you have the answer to that, George, then the world will be very different. But I don't think they even know necessarily.
That's what I mean.
It's a different beast.
There's the 70 million Americans that vote Democrat, and they're like, yay for like conscientious incrementalism. I'm like, okay, that's fine, but doesn't go quite far enough. But I'd rather have a Democrat in the seat than a Republican. And then there's everybody else who just seems completely happy for the country to just drown in a Mobius strip of self-foot shooting if it comes at the expense of the other side.
It's a weird culture, man. I don't know. Like, politically, the Americans are a weird... It's a weird breed.
I've never felt as despondent about it as I do now.
I wouldn't say we're not... Well, I wouldn't say we're any better.
Well, I think though there is
the Americans, but I wouldn't say we in Australia are any better.
There is still some political gravity here. Like, when Barnaby Joyce has an affair and like sires a new kid with his mistress, he gets kicked out of Parliament. Like they're asked. Yes, he gets voted.
Yeah, but then they bring him back.
But the point is that there are still. It feels like there are consequences for actions here to a certain degree, to a certain level, not as much as there should be. But in America, it just seems like there's so much polarization that it's like, if you're a Republican, I'll vote for you no matter. You could be Satan himself dressed up in red, and I would vote for you. Yeah, I just can't understand that.
The concept of truth stories and everyone being on the same page is far more disparaging. Disparaging is not the word I'm looking for, but far more disparate. Sorry, yeah, in the US than it is here. Like, I guess here we can sort of all agree roughly on that there are certain things that have happened, but in the US they may not necessarily even agree that the same things have been said, so to speak. Anyway, I think one of my friends, has pretty strong beliefs in certain things, but he sort of said that, the only way to...
You're not naming him, so you can shit talk him as much as you like.
No, he's all right. But no, what he said was like, the only way to solve the US polarization basically is for them to have another civil war. Whoa. And you forget it. We forget about that. We forget that they had.
Whoa!
They've already had a civil war.
There's a lot to unpack there.
No, well, but the thing is, like, you've got to remember, like, this is a country that fundamentally wanted to rip itself to pieces, like 150 years ago.
Over whether black people should be allowed to be people.
Yeah, but they fundamentally, either way, then they had to put those two sides back together.
I don't know. Maybe they really should secede. Maybe it should be Murica and America. And I think it'd be a much more like, if you really just cleave everything sort of like east of California all the way to, sort of Florida on the other side, that whole sort of southern, everything below the Mason-Dixon line, you can have your own shit country where you can be Gilead, right? Where women don't have any rights and the whole place is just a stinking cesspool of corruption and hypocrites. You can have that. And then all the rest of the country, the productive side of the country, where all the money and GDP comes from, that can be a separate country called America. Like, I don't know what else to suggest at this point. Like, this country is so hopelessly divided. And there's so much of it that I love, typically in the northeast and northwestern parts. There's a lot of great things about it, but it just seems like there is a contingent in this country that is, I don't know how else to describe it other than like so polarized as to be nihilistic, to destroy their very selves at the expense of the other.
The other thing as well, there's 300 million of them. So we see what is put in social media or television, or there's amplified through the algorithms or whatever else. If you go to a suburb in Milwaukee, I don't know, like you walk into a random house, you'll find Jeffrey Dahmer. But you don't necessarily know that the person in that house is they're not going to be necessarily an extremist. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, but they're voting for extremists. And the fact that it's like it can even be an equivalent choice between the two, like, is just baffling to me. Like any other party, like if this was a party in another country that had advocated for and done the things that the Republican Party has done, even from the minority in the last couple of years with their appointments to the Supreme Court, they would get punished. People would be like, you guys are a bunch of sociopaths and you don't deserve to govern. I don't care if you're my party normally, but the Americans are just they're so gone. They're just like completely polarized. It's just R and D. And I'm an R guy, so I vote for the R guy. And it literally does not matter what they do because I hate the Ds so much.
Yeah, well, it's like I've said many times on the show regarding here in Australia with the Labor and Liberal Party, that whenever the Liberal Party was being absolute shitheels, they still always get their support, because the only thing that a moderate Liberal voter hates more than corruption in the Liberal Party is the Labor Party ever.
I said earlier it was a 1 to 3 point advantage that the Republicans have over the Democrats. I meant to say a 1.3 point advantage, according to the latest 538 average. But I mean, this is what happens normally in midterms: is the party in power gets slaughtered. They lose the House, they might lose the Senate as well. The senatorial candidate John Fetterman over in Pennsylvania is like really key to that race. Biden and Obama were there rallying for him recently. Is a key guy for them to hold the Senate, and 6 months ago he had a stroke. Has not been the same since. And then there was a debate between him and Dr. Oz. You remember Dr. Oz from the TV? He's the one who's running against him.
Yeah. That loon.
And and now the race is tied again, even though the guy was, John Fetterman's has been an articulate leftist populist that has been, and who's run a great campaign and has done everything well on the ground to win working class voters in Pennsylvania to his side. It seems like, he performed badly in the debate, and so people are going to throw him under the bus. It's like, I just don't understand you guys. I don't get it. Like,
yeah. And it's just frustrating how did you guys lose me?
No, I can hear.
Still got you.
I'm still here. Okay, sorry, I just had an alert pop up on my screen. What also just frustrates me as well is that, as you say, we have this usually in the midterms, the guys in power get slaughtered or whatever because, an indictment on the current president or whatever.
Yeah.
That it seems that even when they do have any kind of ground, the Democrats I'm referring to here, they don't seem to do anything, and they won't say that they'll do anything until it's closer to either a midterm or a actual election, the presidential election. Like, I saw Biden recently on his official Twitter or whatever talking about how it's like, hey, vote for the Democrats because if we make some gains in the House or the Senate or whatever in the midterms, we will codify Roe v. Wade. We will codify abortion rights to be the law of the land, whatever, in the states. And it's like, oh, okay, but what about all the times you've had to do that previously? Why didn't you just do that?
Yeah.
Stop holding it over people. Yeah, stop holding this over people until you get to election point and actually fucking do something. And I can see why people would be so at least disengaged politically, not as a reason to go, well, I'll vote for the Republicans because the Democrats just don't do anything. It's like, that's equally insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just nightmarish.
That's a function of a couple of things, right? They don't have the votes. Like, even though they have the majority in the House, they only hold a very slim majority in the Senate currently. And at least they will for the next 2 days. And it's all you need is one senator that doesn't want to get on board with it, or this weird sort of absolutist, just cock-sucking faith in the filibuster and the inability to overcome that as a way of getting legislation through. They haven't had the votes to get to get some of those more meaningful packages passed. They just haven't been able to do it because they have such a slim majority. And then people go, well, they've got, they haven't been able to get anything done, so I'm going to vote them out. And so it's a system that's like self-reinforcing from a polarization perspective. If you're a two-party system, and obstructionism hurts the other guy and helps you get back into power next time, if the margins are so thin where it's just like a couple seats either way can get you back into power, it actually makes you less responsive to governing in coalition. If you're getting thumped, if you're like 2/3 of the seats in the House and Senate are Democrats, right? If you're a Republican, you go, well, fuck, I've got to go along to get along because otherwise I'm going to get none of my priorities through, right? It encourages collaborative thinking. But if everything's on a razor thin margin all the time, every time, there's no incentive for you to cooperate, because the more you throw them under the bus, the more you obstruct, the more you stop things from happening, the more likely it is you'll be back in power again next time in one election cycle in the space of 2 years. So there's no reason for them to cooperate, because it behooves the Republicans to be bipartisan. Everyone's all horny for bipartisanship all the time. Everyone talks about bipartisanship. But there's no incentive for them to be bipartisan. If anything, the primary system that they've got encourages people to be more radical, because if you're not radical enough, someone will out-primary you in your own seat to the right of you, who's even more radical.
You stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, you need to stand out from the crowd. And it's also like a social media thing. It's also a funding thing. The more crazy and outlandish you can be online, the more you raise small dollar donations and all this sort of stuff, and people at your rallies and turnout and all that sort of stuff. It's I just don't see how it can get better. Like, unless they get thumped and continue to get thumped for 2, 3, 4 election cycles, the Republicans are just going to keep doing this, because there's no the voters have openly stated there is no political penalty for insurrectionist behavior. If there was an insurrection, could you imagine if there was an insurrection here in Australia, the Liberal Party, all the young liberals in their khakis and their button-down shirts got together, tried to storm the government? You think people would ever vote for them again? They'd be like, no, fuck you. You guys are borderline fascists. We're not going to vote for you again.
Well, I'd like to think we wouldn't.
Never say never, George.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Political gravity would bring them back to earth. But they're just off the planet, these Republicans. And no one's penalizing them for it. So they keep doing it.
Probably a good segue to go to Pakistan.
All the other political violence in the world.
Yeah.
All right. Why don't you take the lead on the Pakistan story, Adam? Because I've read the article and I've done some Googling, but I'm not familiar with all the players. So why don't you tell me?
There are many players, and I am also partly fuzzy on it. But I guess the thrust of it is cricket players are have entered politics for a while now and are getting shot. So there is a man by the name of Imran Khan, who is the former Pakistani Prime Minister. He is a former cricket player. Cricket's very big in Pakistan, and it was a big thing when he came to power, because it was like, oh, a sports person is now in charge, and he's a moderate, and like, what's he going to do to change the world? And he speaks English really well, and it was a whole thing. And that was also a reaction against the prevailing sort of political dynasty that was there with the Sharifs, I believe, from memory. Anyway, but he got ousted recently. I want to say like 6 months ago, because of a whole litany of reasons. Basically, obviously pandemic stuff, some corruption stuff, and he basically got pushed out of the prime ministership, right? But everyone loves a comeback kid, and he has been slowly campaigning to try and get himself back into power. The pathway, however, to do that is pretty obscure. But even so, he's went to a rally in his home constituency of Mianwali in early October, and he had asserted that he had information of a plan to kill him. And lo and behold, not very long afterwards, he was shot in the leg. So he survived, and I think he's recovering at this point. He allegedly was shot by a man who basically thinks that he's pretty angry at Imran Khan because he thinks he is a prophet. And that's a quote from this gentleman called Ahmed. Apparently,
it's like he put up a video and stuff, didn't he? Like, this is a person like kind of putting out a confessional saying that
he owned up to it, and then was regretting that
he didn't manage to kill him.
So the important part of that, though, is he said the quote is Imran Khan thinks he is the prophet. Which is a blasphemous accusation, right? And the whole idea is that those kind of accusations of blasphemy have been used. It's a crime in Pakistan. There's a Christian woman that was sentenced to death not that long ago for Asa Bibi, who was on death row after being convicted of blasphemy. So the charge of blasphemy is a pretty serious one, and it tends to, and from what it seems like here, it seems to be pushing. Asserting political violence, as we've seen by Imran Khan's shooting recently. So
and I guess the parallels. I mean, there's a lot of stuff with the political system in Pakistan.
It does seem like there has been political violence and corruption on both sides. It's not like a first.
Yeah, and there's a history of assassinations. Like the most recent one, I guess, would be Benazir Bhutto, who was shot dead probably about 10 years ago now, I think it was. But the thing being is with Pakistan, there's the religious aspect, there's the political dynasties, and then there's also the relationship with the military. Like, you've got to have a good relationship to the military. Part of the reason why Imran Khan got his first prime ministership was because he had military support. If you don't have the backing of the military, part of the thing was that with Bhutto, that they reckon there may have been state involvement in that because someone in the military didn't like her. So it's a whole, you think the American system is bad? The Pakistani system is fucked.
Yeah.
It is a quagmire. So what's recently happening, I guess, is that there is a party called the TLP. Okay, they're an extreme right political party. And what they've been doing they've been weaponizing, as George said, blasphemy for votes and protests. And they've got, the quote is from Al Jazeera, is that they've got assassinations embedded in their DNA. So they've got this sort of icon called Mumtaz Qadri, who was shot dead at the governor of Punjab, Salman Taseer, in 2011. Taseer had been publicly campaigning for a presidential pardon for a Christian woman, which George mentioned, and then he was assassinated. So then, when Qadri, so this is the idol for the TLP, when he was executed for the assassination, there were massive crowds at his funeral, huge,
became a martyr for the cause.
Basically, yeah. So now the problem is that the mainstream political parties, and this is the thing, we've talked about the Overton window, we've talked about how it works in the US. When far-right crazies start to push the public discourse, the main political parties, rather than going, that's fucking stupid and ignoring it, they jump on board. So now, and Imran Khan, on his political comeback, has started to use that himself, to push this person's potentially doing blasphemy and So the mudslinging just starts to get circular. So now there's a couple of parties, and I won't go into it because it's just complicated. There's lots of acronyms. But basically, the point being is the whole political system is getting dragged down by these far-right actors, which will probably be interesting because it will segue this to what's happening in Israel as well.
I have a question. Do you think that economic instability and the pandemic and inflation and all these factors, do you think this
and
is
the floods?
the floods in Pakistan,
Yeah.
natural disasters and people being everyday people being disenfranchised
it makes it
by the
worse.
system.
Yeah.
Do you think that has a causal relationship to this kind of political instability?
There's definitely a correlation. I wouldn't necessarily. I think some of this stuff exists anyway because it's in the cultural and political framework of the country, but it makes it worse, right? Because inflation's going off the wazoo. The people that ousted Imran Khan in the first instance, they were like, we'll try and fix things, and they haven't fixed things. It's been 6 months. It's a whole thing.
I remember,
but yeah, I mean,
when we first started talking about the pandemic, you said, and it might be the smartest thing you've ever said, is that the thing isn't going to be the pandemic. It's going to be the after effects, the second and third order effects. What happens after the pandemic? That's going to really change the course of history. And I think we're starting to see that now. With inflation, the economic situation, the Reserve Bank of Australia is forecasting very minimal GDP growth for the years ahead. Inflation's going to linger longer than they thought it was going to. All that sort of stuff.
That's here in Australia, but who cares about Australia? In other parts of the world, their economies are literally collapsing.
Yeah, and it's even more pronounced in these other sort of developing economies as well. So I think we are starting to see the real fallout from the pandemic, which is not just the millions of people that have died, but the cracks and the fractures that it's created in the rest of society that are going to. This is how. I remember seeing a lot of commentary at the start of the pandemic being like, oh, the pandemic was, 1920, and then the stock market crashed in the 30s, and then, the world was back at war again in the 40s. And I was like, oh, yeah, I mean, I think you guys are sort of drawing a bit of a long bow there. But now I don't know. You see the conflict in Ukraine and Russia kicking off, potential conflict with Taiwan and China kicking off in the next couple of years. I think that historians 50, 100 years from now will look back on this period and the coronavirus will be a
pause.
An inciting incident for the rest of these things that are now happening. I don't think it's too long of a bow to draw now.
Yeah, it's people will look at the causes of World War One. They go, well, it wasn't necessarily the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. It was all the alliances and the arms race.
It was the military build-up.
Yeah.
It was,
So the COVID will be one of those, probably.
That's what I think, yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so the point being is the reason why this is significant is that Pakistan, it's a huge country in terms of, Central Asia. It's obviously on the border of India. If Pakistan, it's on the border of Afghanistan as well. If Pakistan, ends up with a shitload of political violence. Keep in mind as well, they had a massive civil war with the Pakistani version of the Taliban, not more than 10 years ago. So, if Pakistan is not stable and continues to sort of have, devolutions in its political sphere, then it kind of makes the rest of the, it has ramifications to the rest of the world, whether that be its neighboring, Afghanistan or India, particularly potentially with India, given that they hate each other.
And they're both nuclear-armed states.
And they're both nuclear-armed states, and that's pretty serious. But yeah, probably a good way to segue to Israel.
I promise there'll be some jokes.
There'll be some jokes
here at some point, I swear to God. When did we become so serious? Is it the world that made us serious, or did we just grow up?
I'm serious. I need to be more funny. I don't have any funny jokes to say about the world. It's all sad.
Yeah, it's all really sad.
We're switching it. It's a movie podcast now. Well, I don't know if I really think that Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 4 has just kind of lost its way. Since the big bad Thanos was gone, I just don't think things have really been the same. As soon as you start bringing in the multiverse, it lowers the stakes. Anyway, another 45 minutes of three white dudes talking about She-Hulk.
Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu.
Great. What's happening in Israel? I'm sure it's great. I'm sure it's fantastic. Can't wait to hear about it. Is it good?
They've had a set of elections, and Benjamin Netanyahu looks to be the prime minister.
Great.
Again.
Cool.
Neat.
There's the same Benjamin Netanyahu that has an ongoing corruption trial.
Yeah, that one. Yeah,
Awesome.
Oh, nice.
Not resolved yet at all, but
Cool. Well, I'm sure his position of power as the Israeli prime minister won't get in the way of that being a transparent process for all.
so he lost his basically he got pushed out because of this corruption thing, and
trial.
then there's basically a bunch of like the last set of elections. There's a bunch of moderates that sort of got in with a political coalition, I believe, from memory.
So the
in
whole
Israel,
point-
you kind of have to have a coalition to govern it.
Correct.
There's too many parties.
And the whole point of this coalition, even though it contained multitudes, right? People on the left, the far left, they had some religious elements in there as well. The whole point of the coalition was basically uniting all of the opposition around preventing Benjamin Netanyahu from staying in power. It's like all of these people who didn't necessarily really agree on a bunch of stuff united in coalition to defeat Netanyahu. And that lasted for not very long. And yeah,
It basically
it's their
had
fifth election in 4 years, I think I remember seeing. So it's been very tumultuous and
So the concerning thing about
back into power, Netanyahu's partnered with ultra right wing parties in order to get the seats together to form government. So that's
and no period in history has ever gone terribly with the addition of the statement partnered with far right parties in order to gain power.
That's generally
it's always gone really well.
I mean, it's not really unprecedented for Israel. I think the Zionists have been sort of in and around the sphere of influence for many years. But the thing is, like, the peace process with Israel and Palestine stalled, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it was. And there were, at least the former prime minister, he kind of had a very moderate tone around it. Like, he's like, we should try and, like, the statement was we should try and work together to try and work something out. And then their actions didn't follow through at all. There were, people getting shot and stuff. Still by security forces and raids, over the border into the West Bank and various other things that have been happening over the last 6 months. But the thing is with these Orthodox guys that are coming in, they're already trying to tee off for positions of power, basically.
Positions,
Yeah. This will mean that they'll have things like, I've got to find the page now. These are people that have got anti-Arab rhetoric. They are things that are looking that, they'll be in charge of things like the police, public security, and defense.
Oh, seem keen on reversing LGBT-friendly laws. Good.
Man, I was so happy when Netanyahu got shit canned, and to see him back so soon is just like absolutely not the Christmas present I was hoping for. Like,
he is Israel's longest-serving prime minister, so he's definitely popular.
Yeah, well, but, I mean, popular enough to keep worming his way back into power, but the problem is the landscape is so fractured there. It's not like there's two parties and, it's shit both ways, isn't it? Two-party system, then you've got polarization. It's one or the other. You've got one party that's, completely shameless and will do anything to stay in power, and the other one that's, completely under the influence of corporate capture and wants to do things by incrementalism in a way that's completely ineffective. So as soon as they've gotten power, they've lost it. That's one, the two-party system. And then there's the other multi-party system, which also doesn't work because everything's fractured. It's just like, what is the system? And the Chinese are just sitting there looking over at us going, fucking told you, bro. I told you so hard. This democracy stuff is shit, bro. You're a bunch of losers.
Have you tried Infinite G?
Have you tried a bit of Infinite G? Get some G in you, mate.
Yeah.
It's just it just seems like democracy is just like disintegrating at the moment. It's fucking awful.
That was a great little analogy. That tickled my fancy.
Maybe who was right, Tom? Say again.
Maybe Marx was right.
Eat the rich.
Maybe.
Need to
Need to
seize,
We
have to-
seize those
yeah.
production means.
Mm.
Yep.
I mean, the
Seize
thing
those
is-
means of production.
Like Netanyahu, according to this article, doesn't really have anything in common with these people he's just partnered with. The only thing they really can agree on is that they've
A
got an
lust for
opposition to the
power.
creation,
Yeah.
opposition to the creation of a Palestinian state.
I never understood that. Like, obviously, none of us here are experts about Israel Palestine, but it just seems to me that the whole one state solution, like, you can be a democratic country, or you can have a two-state solution, or you can have a one-state solution. Like, you can't have both of those things, right? If you want a one-state solution where you're in charge of Palestine and you have to integrate all of these Arab peoples into the country who also live in a democratic country and have the right to vote and be represented, like, you can have a Jewish state, or you can have a not Jewish state that's democratic. But then what, you know what I mean? Like, the two things are mutually
I don't think they
exclusive.
think of that, though, when they say a one-state solution. I think they're saying...
The other option is...
we
have
the
a
single
one-state
state
solution.
is Israel, and Israel's slightly bigger.
Yes, yeah. We have a really big Israel.
Palestine is gone, and it's ours now.
And then we have an apartheid state for the Palestinians in that they are not represented whatsoever, but we're still in control, and we're still somehow a democratic country. I don't see how that works. You can't square all those circles.
No.
There were some jokes in there, George.
It was mainly just yelling, and I don't know if yelling necessarily qualifies as jokes.
I don't know. Men have been making stand-up careers on just that for the past 40 years.
It's true.
Well,
yeah,
there's
maybe I'm just Bill Hicks. It's like there's not really jokes, but he's yelling about politics, and I think he's making some good points, so I'm going to laugh.
Yeah, if you just yell enough and read the news, it's comedy.
And that's how George Carlin had a 50-year career in comedy.
Yeah, wonderful.
Just yelling lists.
Speaking of, I guess we're still on the tirade of political violence and instability, but one that maybe has
what a fun theme! What a fun theme for a comedy show on a Sunday afternoon. Jesus
it's a great
Christ!
theme for this
My
week.
GP said I need to watch out for my blood pressure, and this podcast isn't helping. Can I just fucking say that?
But you'll never quit, George.
While voluntarily doing the podcast.
No, you're right. He's right, though. I am hopelessly addicted to you. I wish I could quit you.
I wish I could quit you. But yeah, I guess the one element of some political violence and instability that also maybe has some slight good news to it. Bolsonaro lost the election in Brazil just now. So that's good.
Bye, Bolsonaro.
Yeah. Bye-bye, Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro, the man who touted himself as unfloppable.
He was making a joke about his manhood, which I love it when people running the country make dick jokes. Like it's their job, and they're not taking the dick jokes out of my children's mouths.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
sure
we'll
there's a
make
better
the
way
dick
to say
jokes.
that.
Yeah, we'll make the dick jokes for you, Bolsonaro. You don't have to do any of that.
That's our shtick.
But yes, the unfloppable Bolsonaro was subsequently flopped. Not even a good dick joke. I mean,
it's not great, is it? But it's his own joke. So
yeah. Has this just been translated? In a way like maybe it sounds a lot better. When he said it.
Oh, it sounds great in Portuguese. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, doesn't it sound better in Portuguese? But okay. But yeah, anyway. But yeah, the unfloppable flopped. And that was a chant, apparently, that was being bellowed around in Brazil following Bolsonaro's loss. Yeah, so a bit of a crazy situation, especially because in the lead up to the election, Bolsonaro was always saying things like, I'm appointed here by God or whatever, and like, no vote will ever cast me out. Like, the only things that will cast me out is my death.
Cool and normal.
Or like the military coming to oust him or something. So now that he's lost the election and there's a new president-elect for Brazil, is he got to make good on that? Is he just going to either drop dead or have to be ousted by a democratically elected coup?
It's an interesting point that you raised because he didn't appear in front of after he lost. And we didn't lose, like the margin isn't huge, but it's a clear, I've lost. It's not like the American election where it came down to like one state or,
where it's like a handful of voters in Arizona could have changed the fucking world.
Yeah. So no, there's enough margin you can go, yeah, okay, like even if they rigged some, like it's definitely clear. So the point being is he didn't appear in front of his supporters for a couple of days, and then when he did appear, he didn't mention anything about losing the election.
About losing, he was just
And
like,
then
"All right, I'm
people
going to get
started
back into the
fucking
office."
rioting. People started rioting. Anyway,
Man,
then he
just
had
Trump
to
in
come
all of
out.
the worst possible ways. This fucking guy.
He's
I'm so
actually
glad.
worse than Trump.
He's so bad.
He then had to come out and then be like, "Oh, can you guys stop rioting, please?" And then now I think,
Guys,
only
quit
like 2
it.
weeks later,
Stop. No, you're so naughty. Stop it.
like nearly 2 weeks later, he's now come out and sort of, said, "Oh, okay, look, we've lost, and I'm not going to stand in the way of a transition to power and all this kind of stuff." So, kicking and screaming.
Only saying that after all the rioting.
Correct.
Like, you let the riot happen first.
Yeah, just
like when in doubt, let the people riot for a bit, then do the right thing.
It's like when you're at the GP and you're filling out the questionnaire and they say, like, do you drink? And you go, oh, I have a snifter of port at Christmas. So he's like, yeah, I just like a dash of political violence before bed. Nothing too serious. But
yeah, just a little bit. I only like my political violence to happen around election time.
Yeah, just a snifter.
All the other times a year, nah.
Just a sousant of political violence, and then I'm done.
Yeah, but we were discussing this a bit before the show, but in this article from The Guardian that we were looking at just to see what's happening in the fallout of Bolsonaro's loss, that Bolsonaro's allies are already trying to point the finger. It's like, where did we go wrong? Like, rather than pointing at maybe Bolsonaro himself.
And I would say to those allies,
awful person.
You're pointing a finger. You've got 4 fingers pointed back at you, buddy, because you are the ones that have caused this. Because here are some of the stories. You ready?
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No. Well, I was going to say the other scapegoats have been pointing at some of their other members of the Bolsonaro's allies. There was one person who we got, Paulo Guedes, who recently, I'll quote here, recently undermined Bolsonaro's flawed claims to have led a corruption-free government by admitting, quote, we steal less than our opponent.
Yes, we steal. Everyone steals. This is a finance minister, by the way. Yes, we all steal. Okay, but we steal less. Okay?
But there's another one.
Where are you going? Why aren't you voting for us?
Roberto Jefferson is a Bolsonaro ally who is currently in jail facing attempted murder charges because he attacked federal police on the eve of the vote with grenades and a rifle.
What the fuck?
As you
grenades. Who has multiple grenades in their house?
Yep.
I make jokes about grenades because they're silly and as if I would have a grenade.
Yes.
This guy has actual grenades.
And, they just attacked the police just the day before the vote. And then there was Carla Zambelli, who's one of the far-right congresswomen in Brazil and was filmed chasing a black journalist with a gun in hand. She had the gun, not the journalist.
On election day, if I'm not mistaken.
On election day. And, Carla's been...
And then the line for The Guardian is like, this really switched off some of the moderate voters. I was like, you reckon? Chasing journalists down the street with a fucking firearm? And some of the more moderate people are like, I don't know if that's a good look for Brazil.
Yeah,
I might still vote for them, though. I might still.
Yeah.
Because of the economy.
Yeah, that's the least of what I think Carla achieved by chasing the media armed, alienating voters.
I remember a couple of years ago.
Affecting a free press.
When Bolsonaro rose to power, I just talked about some of the things that he said and did, and rightly came to the conclusion that he was a cunt. And I said so on the show. And I had a guy who's, I wouldn't call him a friend exactly, a former colleague that I used to work with, who would occasionally get onto my Instagram and sort of shitstir me about the political views that I have and sort of be a contrarian dickhead. I've since blocked him because he was being annoying. But he said, what right do you have to call Bolsonaro a cunt? Maybe he's just working for the best, the best things for Brazil and he's just representing his interests.
Should we talk about the best?
And the best things, one of the cool things that he did when Bolsonaro, during his time in power, days before the election, mind you, this is him on his best behavior trying to get people to like him. Just remember that. Days before the election, damaging footage emerged in which Bolsonaro said that he had felt, quote, a spark with a group of 14 and 15-year-old Venezuelan girls who he falsely accused of being prostitutes. He said, yeah, I saw a couple of young prostitutes. I hopped off my bike and I saw a couple of young prostitutes. I was like, is this a vibe? Like, what's going on? Anyway, I just thought I would share that days before the election because I'm not a cunt.
We should also probably mention the 700,000 COVID deaths.
Oh, yeah, just casually, several hundred, 700,000. I was about to say several hundred thousand. Several hundred thousand would be off by a factor of 2 to 3. 700,000 COVID deaths.
The tens of millions of people plunged into poverty. And the collapsing of their economy.
Yeah. But it's not Bolsonaro's fault that he lost the election. No, it's his gun-toting fan.
Feel like the Amazon. Not to mention the
rape of the Amazon.
The fucking Amazon. Fucking jeez.
Yes, not to mention that they're burning the Earth's lungs to the ground.
But it's the leftists like me. It's the crazy leftists that are polarizing the debate. You know, maybe he's just a nice guy trying to represent his country by saying he's going to murder all the drug dealers. Like, maybe he's not the cunt. Maybe I'm the cunt and I made him this way by having human rights in my head.
Yeah, it's all us being turned off by gun-toting congresswomen.
I don't know, when you say it like that, it sounds kind of hot, but...
The ironic thing is that the person who is now the president is, what's his name? Lula.
He's got a long name. Lula da Silva, who was also here it is. Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, who is their new president, is the leftist leader, very popular back in the day. Was also their former president before he was ejected in a corruption scandal. Now, since that time.
Oh, Jesus.
I was going to say, another corruption scandal.
So here's the thing about Lula, is that he was very popular back in the day and helped oversee a period of great economic prosperity for Brazil, dragged a lot of people out of poverty, did a bunch of like solid, good leftist things, but also got caught up in this petroleum scandal. And I don't think it's credible to say that, if all of your chief ministers and people all around you are caught up in this corruption scandal, that you aren't. I think that's unlikely. But the conviction was cleared earlier this year by the Supreme Court, and that's what's allowed him to run in this election and win recently. So on balance, do I think he's less of a sociopath than Bolsonaro? Yes. Is it good that a former politician who was credibly accused of corruption is now again running the country? That's probably not so good. But
yeah, less good.
The thing as well is that he's been able to unite the opposition around himself, right? This is the same thing in Israel, where you have a figure that is polarizing and popular, and then people will unite around it. Or if they're reacting against something else, they'll get behind it. So anyway, I mean, it's probably good for Brazil because literally the last 4 years for them have been, absolute chaos, really. I mean, and you can't even say that he was a good, economic president.
No, it's the economy. Believe it or not, it was the economy that let him down. All of these other things we're talking about, these are just peripheral. Yeah, blah, 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 human rights, blah, blah, blah. Let's have sex with 14-year-old, not prostitutes. Like, all that stuff is just like water under the bridge. People are like, but inflation did go up under him, though. So maybe he's not that good at the economy, and that's why he gets voted out. So... whether Lula da Silva will be able to do better given the current economic situation and the forecasting remains to be seen, but it's not looking good. Why would you want to be in charge when the world's like such a piece of shit at this point and everything's headed like directly into the ground? Like, who would want to be in charge? Because you're going to have to own it. This next couple of years is going to be a shit show for basically every country on earth, and whoever's in power is going to suffer the consequences of the public's anger about it. So, like, why would you want to be in charge? It's like Labor here. Labor gets into power right as the recession kicks in, and people go, "Oh, they're not shrewd economic managers like the Liberals. They built all of those car parks." Like the Liberals come in for 9 years, ruin everything, stick their dick in the economy, and then Labor takes power just in time to cop the shit, to cop the consequences and try and mop up after them, and then everyone's dissatisfied with the results. It's like, well, yeah, what'd you fucking expect?
Yep. Tale as old as time.
The medical benefits are great if you're in power, so,
They do have free dental, which
They do have free dental.
Dental's expensive,
I need to get my teeth done. I'm not looking forward to it.
All
On that
right.
note,
I think that's enough political violence and dental for 1 week.
I mean, I did have a story about the Reserve Bank, but I think we can basically the long and
Economy's
short
going to
of
be
that,
shit for a couple of years.
the economy's just going to be shit for a couple of years. And believe it or not, Philip Lowe might have been wrong about something again.
Wow.
Yeah, it's weird that this guy who gets paid $911,000 a year can be so professionally wrong about things all the time and still have his job.
It's the board. It's the board of the Reserve Bank that just can't come to their collective minds. And it's not just Philip.
Yeah, so it turns out the economic forecasts are probably even worse for the year ahead than we thought previously. Inflation's going to stick around for longer. Wages aren't rising. Corporate profits are at an all-time high, though, so that's great for those people who own shares in those corporations and just about nothing else. So, on that cheery note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that have, do, or ever will exist at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and motherfucking TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
You can follow me on Instagram at AC Doreen.
And you can follow us all down to the Philip Lowe School for being permanently wrong, where we'll be getting our economics degrees. Thanks for listening, guys. I love your faces. We will see you next week.